When officers from the Ministry of Manpower visited over 200 work sites such as food courts and shopping malls since April to assess the working conditions of outsourced workers, one thing stood out. Most of them had rest areas, but some of the areas were not up to the mark in terms of quality. That is why a tripartite advisory to provide rest areas for workers like cleaners and security officers was launched on Tuesday. Guidelines include access to proper rest areas with spaces to keep their belongings and drinking water for all workers. Minister of State for Manpower Zaki Mohamad advised companies to treat workers as extended family, citing this as a key factor that would motivate them to do a good job. There are currently about 77,000 resident workers in the cleaning, security and landscaping sectors. What does this mean for workers here? Here to share more is journalist Sue Ann Tan. Hey Sue Ann. Welcome to the show. Now, Sue Ann, why the move now? What are some of the gaps or what's lacking in some of these rest areas?
So the advisory was first announced in April as part of the whole Work Care initiative, which seeks to improve the work environment for low-wage workers. So since then, MOM, or the Ministry of Manpower, has visited over 200 work premises, as you have mentioned, to look at the rest areas that the outsourced workers are having. And they found that even though 70% of these places do have rest areas, but these rest areas are not up to mark in terms of quality. So this means that some of these rest areas were unsanitary, or they lacked shelter, or they did not have good ventilation and were unhygienic. And separately, there have also been reports of outsourced workers having rest areas at places like bin centers and even in certain public storage areas. And often when members of the public see these workers resting, they think that they are slacking off work. So that is the assumption that is there. So this advisory is meant to set expectations of what a proper rest area should constitute.
Right. Let's get into more detail here. Speaking of the advisory, what are some of the proposed guidelines that the advisory has brought forward?
So the advisory says that rest areas should be private, first of all, so they should be away from the eyes of the public. They should have facilities for workers to safekeep their belongings, such as lockers, and they should have access to drinking water, such as providing them with kettles or water dispensers. And they also should be sheltered, that means away from the sun and the rain, and they should have proper lighting and ventilation, and they should be clean and quiet and safe, and they should be big enough to have the furniture needed, such as the tables and chairs.
Now, Sue Ann, the guidelines certainly sound fair and necessary, but I understand that there might be some complications and challenges to implement them, right?
Yeah, so certainly some of the challenges mentioned were that in older buildings and even in some condominiums, they do not have the space for a rest area on their existing premises. And in those cases, the building owners perhaps are encouraged to let the outsourced workers share in the space that they already have for their own employees. And some companies may also worry about the cost of having such a rest area. And in such cases, the tripartite partners, which are MOM, ntuc and snef, can work with companies to find solutions, such as the rooms that are less heavily used and they can be converted into rest areas. In the case of IKEA Alexandra, which they were visiting yesterday, they had converted around 2 parking lots into a space for rest area for the outsourced workers.
I see.
So the HR manager for the place also said that the cost of the rest area is not a separate budget, but is considered with the overall operational cost of the building. So this includes like the lighting and the air conditioning needed for the rest area. So this shows that it is possible for companies to try to improve the well-being and the welfare of these outsourced workers.
Right. Well, thank you, Sue Ann, for coming on to the show and for sharing more about this. If you'd like to read Sue Ann's full story, head on over to our website, straitstimes.com.